It's time for the Delaware Valley's first radio doctor.
On call every Saturday afternoon at 5.
This is Your Radio Doctor with Dr. Marianne Ritchie.
Presented exclusively by Independence Blue Cross.
Your health determines your life, your longevity, and your happiness. Let your radio doctor lead the way with your medical education. Your Radio Doctor, Dr. Marianne Ritchie.
Good afternoon and welcome to Your Radio Doctor. I'm your host, Dr. Marianne Ritchie. Well, according to the Population Reference Bureau in Washington, D.C., the current growth of the U.S. population that includes ages 65 and over is driven by the large baby boom generation, those born between 1946 and 1964, and is unprecedented. For those over age 65, the current guesstimate is that in 22, the 58 million count will rise to 82 million by 2050. The good news? Education levels are increasing, older adults are working longer, poverty rates have dropped, and a greater number can meet their daily care needs. The challenges? Well, in a single generation, obesity has nearly doubled in the elderly, going from 22% to 40%. More older adults are divorced and living alone. Many have children who no longer live in the same neighborhood, and the demand for elder care is expected to increase sharply with the number of Americans living with Alzheimer's. Joining us today is Ms. Tricia Wingerter. After watching her own mother struggle to care for Tricia's grandmother and great-aunt who suffered from dementia, and her dad had terminal colon cancer, all while Tricia was only in middle school. So about 15 years ago, Tricia found purpose in starting a home care agency in her mother's name, beautiful, providing home health care and information regarding benefits to help families caring for dependent loved ones. And now she owns a franchise of Visiting Angels, which for 25 years has provided senior home care with the goal of upholding the dignity and well-being of seniors so they can age in place in comfort and safety at home. Welcome, Tricia.
Hi, it's a joy to be here. You're talking about my favorite topic.
Well, I mean, I love the elderly as well. And now that I'm getting closer, I hope people love me when I need help. But Tricia, tell us a little bit about that time in your life when you watched your mother, who cared for her mother and her aunt, who both obviously weren't completely aware. They felt confused. They lived alone. And your mom and you lived over 300 miles away. What did you learn from watching her? And she made it happen, but what did you learn from her?
It was incredibly challenging and stressful. And I know there's an age in here where you're still a parent, but now your parents need care. I guess it's a sandwich of some sort. But living that far away meant that she had to count on her sister and other family to go in and report, and they were having such difficulties, and my mom couldn't hop in the car and drive down there. It was a haul, plus she had me to care for, and my father at the same time. And then on top of it all, her aunt, her favorite aunt in the world, was really showing the same kind of signs. And those signs, it's very hard to become the person in charge when you're the child of. That's what I really witnessed. She would have ideas and she would want to help, but I'm fine. I don't need your help. Since who gives you the right to come in and tell me how to do my finances? That was a big one. And how dare you think that you can hire someone and bring them in the house? I don't need help. I'm fine. So again, trying to navigate when you're on the phone and you can't see. So today we have a lot of other things we can use. There's iPads and iPhones and et cetera to kind of check in with your family to see. But at that time, it was horrific. It was horrific. And I can say from what I understand is that back when my grandmother was my age, in her early 50s, 60s in there, she lived with family. Her brother lived in the house. Both the grandparents lived in the house. Everybody was working. Everyone was doing something. So you just picked up and cared for whatever. But now kids leave. They leave the area, they're stagnant, their job changes, they're transferred, and they move out. And then you're trying to manage this like my mother did, 365 miles away.
It really does amplify the whole problem because, as you say, in the past, families lived 2 and 3 generations together, and it was beautiful, and our culture has changed. And I think kids that go through college think because they can talk to somebody across the world via a website that their living situation ends up being the same, and it doesn't. So let's talk about home health care and what it includes and what it does not include, because I think it's really important for our listeners. It's important for us to clarify that terminology.
Oh, big
What
time.
is what it includes and what it does not include. Home health care.
And you yourself mentioned multiple times that you thought there would be medical involved in what we do, but it is not medical. It is considered personal home care assistance. And that means bathing, dressing, assisting with walking, making sure they're eating, prepping meals, doing some housekeeping, and then watching out and being on the offense for events. And events are big deals, okay? That's the trip in the fall. That's the taking the wrong medication. That's getting a phone call saying, hey, I'm coming to do your lawn service. You're past due on a bill. And they're giving a credit card on the phone. I mean, all these things go on and you're not there for the day-to-day to witness them. And parents tend to think everybody's, has their best interest at hearts, but they don't.
So you mentioned a couple things that I want to just emphasize. That personal care assistant, the visiting angel in your case, is not a skilled nurse. They have training. We're going to talk about that.
Correct.
But they're there to assist with dressing and bathing
Correct.
and hygiene. I did speak to superstar Paula Perez.
She's
we're
my
going to be talking
caregiver of
to
the
her.
year. Woo!
Yes.
Yeah.
And she mentioned that with her client that she helps her with toileting. I love that expression. I have to compliment you, because you don't say the demented patient, you say the patient with dementia.
Right.
Just as it's the whole mission of your work is to treat people with dignity and use dignified terms.
Correct.
So toileting.
I had to learn that, by the way. Okay.
Well, I bet you already knew that, though.
I picked up quick, but I can tell you I was corrected one time.
But I mean, like, so if
we use
Paula
undergarments, okay? We don't use diapers. That is so
okay, that's what I was
undignified
going to
and
say.
embarrassing.
But
and
aside from the terminology, does a personal care assistant help change a diaper, or if the person's confused?
see, we would not be changing diapers because we do not take care of children, even though their behaviors can be that way. We use undergarments, and a lot of times they're very they're embarrassed.
Sure.
They don't want to use them. They're embarrassed by the thought of it, especially when someone like their children says, oh, you're going to start taking diapers, Dad. This is crazy. No, it's done nicely. Usually my caregivers carry some in their purse and they say they're for themselves. Oh, of course I use them. See, I'm normalizing this. Okay. We never want to do anything that would take their dignity away.
No, but I guess the question is,
control of so much.
Do they actually help the person? Do they help them change
100%.
that? Okay.
And there's a way to do it that's proper. Okay, that they're trained, like we're not going to go slam somebody on a bed. You ask first, how would you like this done? Let me assist you. Do you want to do this in the bathroom? Everything's a question, but 9 times out of 10, if there is some dementia, the 2 questions are both yes answers. Do you want to do it in here or in here? But we're going to be doing this. Okay.
There you go. And that's the art form with really focusing on making the person comfortable, not frightened. Because my own dad, who was Henny Youngman, should have been on Ed Sullivan, funny, a funeral director who comforted. We have stacks of letters from people who say how he comforted. He was so professional. He was never silly in the workplace, obviously. But when he started to become more and more confused and lose his cognition, he became a little defensive. I don't want to say paranoid. And that's when they start to argue and say, I'm good. I can do this myself.
Right.
But then when you see them having a problem, you have to, as you say, do you want to do it this way or that way?
Talking points. Just like when you had a 2-year-old and they had to get dressed for school. You want the white shirt or the blue shirt? It's not, let's get dressed. Do you want to get dressed?
So some of the answers to the questions I'll be asking you will be if the person's clear of mind or if they're not. So
correct.
Yeah.
Correct.
So Tricia, if one of your assistants is with a client and they notice I say patient, but
it's client because it's not medical. Yes.
Right. That the client is having changes in their ambulatory skills, they start to trip, or if they start to have memory deficits or they're not eating, what's the next step? They report to your office and then you contact the family member or the power of attorney. How does that work?
Every day there's tasks that are to be done, and every day they take a few notes, and it goes right into our software. We have it so that the family can come into that software and look through it if they like, but we'll also send, hey, there's a little something going on. You've got somebody that keeps knocking on the door. asking for money, because we do a lot in apartment complexes, senior centers, that type of thing. But the other one is changing a gate. Like, what happened? Hey, I noticed you're having a problem with your leg here. Oh no, everything's fine. But as we're watching, we could see it's changed. You might be hurt. So that could be an alert for a doctor visit, or it could be alert for maybe some physical therapy, and we're not quite sure. Sometimes it's maybe he didn't take his meds. Let's go back and review that. Maybe they need to go up the meds again because they're in pain. So there's a lot of things go on, but we're not diagnosing. We're merely alerting. Here's what we've noticed. And then it involves, we can call the doctor on the family's behalf and set up an appointment. And we usually take them in the appointment,
That was
take
my
little
question.
notes. And then the other piece of that is when the caregiver's there, she's really listening. And I need to say he too, because I have quite a few male caregivers as well. And they're taking notes and making sure the client's asking appropriately. Because sometimes the doctor's in a hurry and it needs to go on, and they're saying, oh, but remember the last 3 days in a row, you've had this issue. So we cut it to the chase. And again, we'll line up skilled nursing as well for them. Again, it's not something I provide, but I have a large network of providers in the area, and usually they're affiliated with a doctor, and that's next.
So I'm going to hold you there for 1 second, because what you describe, the services that you just described, are non-skilled, meaning
Correct.
the things we mentioned, bathing and that
Correct.
sort of thing. Skilled means it involves somebody with a nursing background or a nursing assistant that involves medications and those. So levels of care, 3. Non-skilled is what you provide. Skilled would involve nursing, which is not in your bailiwick, or hospice, which is enhanced care. We're just trying to
Right.
define those terms for people.
Um,
And you said so beautifully, you want to be preventive in your care.
Correct.
And
Because you don't want skilled nursing in your house. Okay.
yeah. So we're going to take a little break, but I just want to finish with, you want to look for a flight risk. If somebody starts to get confused, you don't want them to take off,
That's another scary story.
right?
Yes.
And you look for fall risk. Let's take a little break, and when we come back, more with Tricia Wingerter from Visiting Angels.
Thanks for listening to Your Radio Doctor with Dr. Marianne Ritchie, exclusively presented by Independence Blue Cross. If you have a question for the medical mailbag, just send a note to doctor@yourradiodoctor.net.
Welcome back to Your Radio Doctor. We're learning so much about home health care from our very special guest, who owns a franchise of Visiting Angels, Ms. Tricia Wingerter.
Yes.
Welcome back, Trish.
It's a pleasure to be here. And I'm going to add this to my statement. I mean, who wouldn't want to be an angel, and who doesn't want to have an angel care for them? So the name is perfect.
I hear you. Well, Pennsylvania in itself has 3.4 million older adults. And we use that expression meaning your clients to you, but people who live in Pennsylvania who are 65 and older, which is the 5th highest total in the country. So we are fortunate to have your talent and energy helping people. Tricia, one of your services is helping a client. That would be the elderly,
Anyone over 18.
but it would be the relative. It's the person who calls you. That could be the elderly person. I know it's not medical. So the elderly person who's clear of mind might call you for help. Or if they have dementia, the client is actually their relative, their daughter or son, right? So I want to, so people listening know what terms we're using. But
Right.
if you want to help an elderly person or their family member find services and learn about programs and resources, you advise people to look for their AAA, not to go on a trip, but the Area
Yeah.
Agency on Aging. Every county has one, you told me,
Correct.
which is good to know.
Every county.
I'm going to just rattle off for our listeners what I found when you referred. It's a beautiful resource, and that website and that agency can help with finding adult daycare centers for people that might want to go for socializing. It links to aging and disability resources, senior community centers, caregiver support programs like yours, health, wellness, fitness, and nutrition counseling, employment resources for older adults. I think that's awesome. Housing programs, transportation, Medicare counseling. How confusing. We've done whole shows on how to pick insurance policies and that sort of thing, and pharmaceutical assistance. Tell me about those things, not individually, but
Well,
the area
it's
agency, if you would.
fascinating. It's a really fascinating thing because I did not know a lot of this myself. And when my mother was diagnosed with Alzheimer's, I had to learn it quickly. And it was just, we didn't have the internet back then. Okay. So it wasn't like I could hop on. It was yellow pages. It was, do you know somebody? It was going down to the office to have a person to person. And the resources were very limited. My mother is a widow of a veteran, and I could not even navigate to get her veteran benefit that she's eligible for, as my father put his life on the line, and that was part of the contract. Most of them forget about that, and you find that paperwork in a lockbox or tucked in a shoebox
True.
somewhere. Who knows? So navigating was big. So it is an honor for me when someone calls my agency and they just want information. I want to advocate for them because somebody did it for me, and I want to do it better because I didn't do as well with my mother as I could have. And every day I live with that. You have to look in the mirror. So when I hire a caregiver, if I can't put them in my mom's house, they're not going to come in yours. And with a caregiver shortage that's going on, there's so many people that need care. I do the best I can. So we train our caregivers and we make sure they're competent. We do surprise visits. Because I'm a licensed provider, which is the best way to be, and then to be a part of a franchise is also another level of care, but a level of security for your loved one. It means that all of the caregivers have background checks, and Visiting Angels makes me do nationwide because most of the people in Pennsylvania are coming in from New Jersey and New York. And I only do a Pennsylvania per the Department of Health, but I do the New York, New Jersey as well. And that's where shenanigans show up. And shenanigans are theft and violence. And if you have been convicted of either and have a record, you are not allowed to be in any medical field, let alone a caregiver. So big fun here is most of the caregivers know they don't even apply for me if they have anything in their background
let's
check.
focus
They'll go
on-
work privately.
Let's focus on that for a minute because
Sure.
I wanted to start with the goals of care are to help your clients, help the elderly stay in their homes, and to maximize that person's independence in a safe environment. Because if their children are distant or even an hour away, they're not there every day, they're not next door. When they come home, it's to visit. I love that you say that.
Correct.
You want them to feel like they're coming home to visit and hug and chat and have lunch together, not to be the main caregiver, because that can be very stressful. You told me what I also like is you do a free in-home consultation. You enter the person's home and do an assessment before sending a staff member. And I want people to hear that emphasis that you're a licensed agency.
Correct.
What does that mean? Why is that so important?
For me, it's an integrity piece. And to have the name Visiting Angels behind me meant I had to be licensed. And because I had not done this type of service before, but I had a lot of information, I was guided through it. And it's like a 300-page document just to be considered to be a home healthcare agency. And then I have to go through rigorous training on my own and continually get surprise visits from the Department of Health, constant training. And they have to make sure they come in and they'll check my files for my caregivers. If I hire someone without a background check, they could shut down my agency. I mean, I have to be on top of it. And I'm proud to say I am.
But I think what people need to hear is that you have a passion for this because you've lived it. And you don't want to see other people suffer unnecessarily. And you have so many tentacles. It's just fantastic listening to you because you really, it's so obvious in your voice and the way you express yourself. But you're certified every year by the Department of
Absolutely.
Health.
Right.
You have surprise visits in the homes.
Correct.
Right? And you have to follow very strict regulations
Absolutely.
and compliance. And so the other thing, I mean, we talked at length the other day, and I learned so much from you, that if somebody thinks they're doing a good deed, and they start taking their neighbor out to the supermarket or this or that, and let's say a middle-aged person, let's say a middle-aged man has a mom who lives alone and he lives a few hours away, and he says, well, the neighbor or somebody's going to take charge and take mom to her doctor visits or to church or whatever it is, or go in and check on her. And as you said, if there's a problem, if the mom falls and then that friendship goes or a lawsuit comes along. Tell us about that thinking, because people need to hear that.
That is a big horror. It's one thing if the daughter lived next door and was familiar with the neighbor and everyone knew it, but still, you're taking advantage of somebody else when you have them take you to the grocery store and you are a fall risk. If you fall and they've driven you there and they're helping you out, they're liable. And what about them? Most of them are 65, 70, and the person they're helping is
85.
85,
Yeah,
90. Yeah. And it's amazing the kindness that I see in my own neighborhood where people are doing it. They'll go in and they'll help, and they don't realize it's almost like continuing to feed feral cats. They're going to keep breeding. If you keep helping the senior citizen, you are going to keep danger in their lives, because if they're having trouble going to the grocery store and carrying the groceries, you think they're putting their groceries away when they get home? They're probably leaving the bags at the door, which is a fall risk because they can't carry them up the stairs or they can't put them into the cabinets. The stuff they're eating, they can't see the expiration dates on things. The medications are usually all over the table. There's no rhyme or reason to it. And they're not experts in this field. And who do they alert, right? Oh, it's none of my business.
Exactly.
It's just my neighbor. I'm just taking them to the doctor.
Yes. So, and just to reemphasize, you do background checks on your staff members. This is so clever. People need to hear. And if you find that the person applying to be a staff member has a history of violence or theft, they usually don't apply for the positions because they don't want their record to be discovered. But you also, and I think this is important, the staff member or the assistant, the caregiver, is not allowed to have anything to do with the person's wallet or money, so that you can say, boom, nope, nothing. And
it's bigger than that. It's bigger than that. They can't be a guardian. They can't be a POA. And they can't do any financial decisions with them. It's against the law for a home care agency to do that. That means I can't do it either.
Good to know.
So if I notice that checks are bouncing, that they're paying me, or there's money all over the house, that's a call to the POA.
Absolutely.
And the POA stands for power of attorney.
Yes.
And I can tell you now, looking you right in the eye, guess how many of my clients come to me and don't have a power of attorney, and they have dementia. It happens every day, and they've put it off and they've put it off, and they don't want to pick a kid.
If they don't have a power of attorney, do you say, I'm here to direct you to the agency on aging or that kind of thing? Okay.
Correct. The family member, I will definitely to do
Another
that.
good tip that I learned from you is you do not allow your staff members to exchange phone numbers with the client, the elderly person, because you don't want them to call and say, I'm going to be, about a half hour, I'll be there. You don't want them to bypass you. That any questions or answers go through Visiting Angel Central.
Correct. There is a variety of reasons for that. And we call it boundary breaking on both ends. So the client might want the caregiver to come a half an hour early. Oh, come on, just this one time. You pick me up some coffee and do X, Y, and Z. And then the caregiver comes in, oh, I got the coffee. You're like, oh, that's right. You're my favorite one. Okay. So which one she always want? The one that's a rule breaker. Well, when she's doing this work, she's not clocked in. Should she slip and fall, she's not eligible for workman's comp. So the family will be paying for her health care. Okay. And secondly, if you hire someone through my agency, I'm mandated to have commercial insurance and workman's comp and unemployment. So if the caregiver gets hurt transferring or doing a task, I'm covered. And so are your parents and the loved one in the home. But if you hire them under the table because you shared the phone numbers and now this caregiver is going to start working for you privately, when you no longer need her services, ... that means you've passed away. Your family is going to be hit with a big unemployment.
Oh, my goodness.
Big time. Yep. And the last one I saw was about $120,000 a family called me
Holy
about.
Toledo. And see, what's so important that you're sharing this. I could have done a show and said, here are the numbers to call if you need help. You're talking about the nuts and bolts of the everyday.
Nuts and bolts.
When you have a family member who has surgery and ends up needing home care or starts to lose their cognition, you're overwhelmed with the upsetment, and you need to know where the brake is before the car starts to roll down the hill, right? That's what we're doing. We're trying to tell people the things they need to know. This is awesome.
Correct. And I don't like fear tactics. Like this conversation.
No, this is not
come up,
fear. This is
but to
this
be
is
honest,
information.
you were asking me what's the difference between just hiring the caregiver yourself or just hiring somebody that's a friend versus hiring an agency.
Yeah.
Because if we're licensed, we have to have these protections in place. So
Yes.
half of my regulations are involved on hiring the caregiver. The other half is the client rights and everything I have to do to respect them.
Exactly.
So being an alert and explaining, that's what we do.
This is great information, Tricia. Let's take a little break, and when we come back, more on home health care.
Now, your real champion.
I know you've got the heart of a champion.
And now for your real champion. I call this segment Paula the Angel. Paula Perez is not just a visiting angel who provides senior home care as a personal care assistant. She's actually an angel from heaven. Now, at age 73, she continues to pour her entire self into a life of service. Paula has showered many people with her love and compassion, including her grandson with spastic cerebral palsy, who lived in her home for 27 years, her daughter who's disabled from an automobile accident, and her husband who has a brain tumor. Well, for many years, Paula was a crossing guard in her town of Bethlehem. And when June arrived one year, she went looking for a part-time job, but her love of caring for the elderly turned into a full and a half-time position. I first heard her story in a segment on 6 ABC News. Paula began working as a visiting angel in 2016 and became the caregiver to Marianne, a 75-year-old woman with progressive dementia. Marianne's family cared for her for the first 2 years, but then she started to wander and they needed help. Paula stays with Marianne from 9 to 4 every day, making sure her quality of life is the best it can be. Marianne was a very accomplished woman, and staying at home was trapping her. So Paula keeps her on the go and asks, "What will our adventures be today?" Paula takes Marianne for a ride each day while they sing music from the 50s and disco music, and their performances rival those of James Corden in carpool karaoke. Marianne is mostly nonverbal, but when the music starts, her face lights up with the familiar tunes as she and Paula sing along. Paula takes her for lunch at the local restaurants where she dated her husband over 59 years ago. And every Thursday, she has breakfast with her sister and her square dance friends. And on Friday afternoon, lunch with her husband Tom and their best friends. Much better than being isolated at home. Paula takes Marianne to the restroom every 2 hours, so there have been no accidents. And at 2 p.m. every day, it's time for ice cream, which seems to brighten Marianne and prevent her from sundowning. They walk around her high school and on trails that she walked with Tom. They feed ducks in the park, visit the Allentown Rose Garden, attend ribbon cuttings, listen to the trumpet player who plays taps on Veterans Day, and visit the places her family didn't even think of, like the Jim Thorpe Museum and the Poconos. They ride around to look at Halloween decorations, Christmas lights. Familiar pictures, songs, and sights seem to spark cherished memories that make Marianne feel secure and calm. It's a form of therapy. Paula said she's had other clients for short periods, but this was her first patient with dementia. It reminds Paula to accept every day. To Marianne, everything is new and spectacular, even though it's not really spectacular. Paula's job was no longer work. It was an adventure, and everyday little things were magnified through Marianne's eyes. It actually makes Paula feel younger. To plan something so simple that would make her elderly companion so happy, Paula says, "She's made me appreciate the small things in life." And though Marianne has never said the name Paula, she never hesitates to hug Paula and cooperate with requests to take her meds, though she might resist complying with her family. In 2022, Paula Perez was named Visiting Angels Caregiver of the Year out of thousands nominated from over 600 franchises. Paula was recognized for her devotion, and she says she treats her clients with dignity and lives by the gospel message, "What you do for the least of us, you do for Jesus." She says, "Marianne doesn't know who I am, but I know who she is. And I've learned as much about dementia and Alzheimer's from her as she has learned from me. I've been paid in the smiles and the tears that we've shared. I am so blessed." We salute you, Paula Perez. You're a real champion.
And welcome back to our final segment on home health care with Visiting Angels franchise owner, Tricia Wingerter.
Pleasure to be here.
Tricia, listen, this is so much terrific food for thought, either for people who are gaining in years or for the children or relatives or dear friends or power of attorney people with an elderly person in their lives that they see is getting to the borderline and they start to need help either for their physical needs and or they're beginning to become confused and losing their cognition. What are some of the most common calls you get from clients?
Surprisingly, it is not the client that's calling me because they're perfectly fine and they don't know why their children are upset with them. So it's generally the daughter of, which is pretty likely because she is the one that's being taken advantage of. And I'm going to say it again. Usually at this age bracket, they're probably 55 to 65 years old. They still have children and they have a job and they have a spouse and a life. And mom and dad are calling all the time. Oh, I can't get the dishwasher to work. Oh my goodness, we need to go to the grocery store. Oh, the doctor called. I've got to run up there. Can you come? I'm at work, Dad. I'm at work, Mom. I can come on Saturday. Oh, I hope I can wait till Saturday. And then instead of going for a visit on a Saturday, it turns into another day of work. And this is what the senior citizen calls independence. They're independent. They're living at home independently. They are not. They have a free labor coming in, their daughter, and expectations are very, very high. And the son he's doing a little yard work, and he's doing a little heavy lifting, and he's coming in as well. And their spouses are coming in and helping. And, it was different 40, 50 years ago because you had family all over and they were all sharing it, but not anymore. It's so much work. And you know what? If you want to be independent and stay home and age in place, hiring a caregiver for 12 to 20 hours a week is being on the offense because it frees up your kids. And then instead of avoiding your call or being freaked out at work, or perhaps they're 8 hours away in another state, we let them know how great you're doing, what type of care we're providing, and here's some issues we're having, and can you help us with it? And usually those issues are mom's checkbook's not clearing, or they're going to the bank every day, because the kids should be helping with the finances, not the day-to-day care. Something I can't do is the finances. So this keeps everybody safe, the kids understand what's going on, and the chances of going to 24-hour care drop tremendously because we're on the offense. We're noticing mom is a bit dizzy, or we're noticing she's not eating her meals. We notice that dad's sleeping until 11, 12, 1 o'clock. Something's going on, and that's a big alert. And so we can usually catch a urinary tract infection, or they're not eating enough, their pills are messed up before anything bad happens.
My mother died pretty early, and she was barely 74, and my dad lived to be 83, but in that time, she was sort of covering for him, and you see this a lot. One person stays better physically, the other one starts, and so my mother was completely clear. Cancer overwhelmed her, and she died pretty quickly. But my dad had this gradual decline, and he'd get the day wrong, or we could see this happening. And I'm from a family of all sisters, and my third sister, Ellen, is really Mother Teresa's sister. She brought my dad in to live with her and would help, and I'd take him a couple of days a week, but there were the nights in a row that he'd wake up frightened or disoriented, and it is a big responsibility, even if you look at it in a loving way. It is hard. And what's interesting is I want to emphasize what you just said a minute ago. You told me in conversation the other day that JAMA, the Journal of American Medical Association, had a recent article, and I looked up a lot of articles on home health care, that quite often a lot of your clients, these elderly patients or their family members will call you, they need 12 to 20 hours to make it safe and stay at home, yes? Quite often it's like you say, you can buy that independence.
It is independence.
Yeah?
It is. And when the event happens, it's a biggie. It's a fall, a broken hip, and suddenly all of the decisions you used to make on your own are now being made for you. you're going to go into the hospital, you're
Yeah.
going to go into a skilled nursing, you're going to have to do physical therapy, and you're going to be able to have to walk upstairs if you live in a split level, which everybody in my area does. The bathroom's
Right.
upstairs, the kitchen's downstairs, the laundry is on the basement floor.
So another quick thing, I'm looking at these heartbreaking stories. That same sister who brought my dad in, her house burnt down from a Pop-Tart. I'm watching these poor people in California, whether they're wealthy or poor. You lose your whole life in a fire, heartbreaking. So it reminds us, have a to-go bag or a box that you take with you.
Right.
For elderly people, you also want to say, maybe have all your papers in one so that if you do start to get fuzzy or you have a hip fracture or something that puts you in the hospital, your family knows right where to go for your passwords,
Yeah.
for your deed to the house, have a, a
I
fireproof
said my mom
box.
did that for me.
Yeah.
That was a game changer.
That's a
It was
gift.
a
Huge
key
gift.
to the lockbox on her cabinet, and if she ever showed signs of dementia or became very ill, I was to go get that key and go get that information. It was all there, all prepped
Because you
out.
knew her wishes, Tricia. You knew her wishes.
Oh, I knew her wishes. She even had them notarized, and
Things,
the
yeah.
wishes were little things like don't put me into a nursing home, or if you're going to take time off work, reimburse yourself through my money. It was really important stuff like that. And here's the three of us, and I became the POA. I'm the baby of the family.
Oh, I'm
And
the baby too.
I'm happy with it. And
Me3.
my brother was ticked off that he wasn't, because he's the oldest, son. And my sister, I thought she was the obvious choice because she and my mom got along so well. But she picked me for a reason. And I stood up to both of them. And it's amazing. There's three of us, so there's always 2-1. And a lot of decisions had to be made. I did what my mother wanted. They had what they wanted to have done. And she knew I
There
would
you go.
follow it to the rule because that's
Yeah.
the kind of gal she is. Okay?
Yeah.
It was a toughie. It was a toughie, but mom knows best in this case. She
Yeah.
did.
I also wanted to ask you how often, this must happen pretty often, that a client calls either the elderly person, himself or herself, or their family member and asks, gee, Tricia, this sounds fantastic. You've thought it all through. It's like buying the package with the bow on it. But how do I pay for this care? Is it covered by insurance? What is out of pocket? Let's talk
Well,
about that.
they all think insurance is going to pay for it, Medicare, but Medicare is skilled nursing. So they will pay 100 days of Medicare in a hospital, in a facility, physical therapy, all of that is included. But it's a ticking, and after that 100 days is up, you don't have it anymore. So your facility care is going to be paid for out of pocket. So when it comes to me, I'm the one you bring home with you to prevent the fall or the reason to go back in. And if you want to pay for it, it's not cheap. My rates have doubled in 15 years, which is, I find offensive, because rather than getting that 8-hour day they need or that 4-hour day, they can only afford 2 now, which means that my caregiver is only getting 2 hours of work. You see what the minimum wage and all that stuff has done? And with that being said, how do I pay for it? Well, 9 times out of 10, there's a long-term care insurance policy that came with work, and you've been retired for 20 years and you forgot all about it, and it's in a box or a shoebox somewhere. But if you're currently paying for long-term care insurance, you can stop paying for it, because now is the time you get to use it. And I accept it. Most all agencies that are licensed try to provide it. But the big one everyone forgets about is veterans, because the veterans in Pennsylvania are gold star. They do fantastic things compared to any other state. I have never seen some of the horror stories that they talk about in other states. This state in Pennsylvania is fantastic. Usually, there's aid and attendance. And aid and attendance is a pension that is given to you in your time of need. You have an illness or a diagnosis, and it's a big chunk of money. And they even retro it back from the first day that you become ill. But guess what? It takes 6 months to get it, maybe 9 months. Got to come up with a lot of paperwork, got to fill a lot of stuff out, and boom, you get it. That's one piece of the veterans. The second piece of the veterans is a community healthy benefit. And that's the one where my company, Visiting Angels, comes in, and for a couple hours a week, couple hours a day, depending on your diagnosis, we come in and provide care. So everything I do for somebody that pays for it privately, I do the same for the veteran. So I can do the meal prep, I can do personal care assistants. But the funny thing about this one is it's great when you go into the VA again, because you haven't been in 20 plus, 30, 40, 50 years, and you have to have an exam by the local Veterans Administration. And that doctor writes a prescription to Visiting Angels, and he gets home care.
Oh,
It's a
beautiful.
wonderful, wonderful thing. And they pay fantastic, and they provide care from me, which I'm proud to be a veteran sponsor and take care of this. And lastly, there's widows benefits. Because, when they went in and signed on the dotted line that they would give their life for the country, in return, here's 3 things that the Veterans Administration will do for you. Again, most of them forget about it because they've been have been to war since World War II. And I do have a client that's 104 years old as we speak. But this piece for the widow means that should you pass away and leave a widow and she needs care, there's a huge pension for them as well. It will not do the community healthy benefit, but it will provide a pension. And that could go to home health. It could go to skilled nursing, independent living. It's fantastic.
We have about a minute left, Tricia, and I thank you so much. This has been really enlightening. I've lived through it myself already, but my dad passed away, in 2009. So a lot has changed in the meantime. Quick question, if I may. I'm sure people are seeing the ads on TV that if a family member wants to become the care assistant, there are ways to get paid to do that, because if you have to give up your job, you can still maintain the family life with your children and spouse, right? So that's a good thing. And where would we direct listeners to that website, Area Agency on Aging?
It would be a great place to go, but they certainly could call an agency that is a provider. And all of them are on the list at that office. You would get that. But what they have to understand is I would walk through explaining to them that if you are a family member, you have to be hired by my agency, and I have to be a Medicaid provider. It has 2 folds there. Medicare is your insurance, but Medicaid is inability to pay. And most likely you have a diagnosis in order to receive care. So if you need a couple hours a day, 8 hours a day, 12 hours a day, 168 hours a week, all of it can be done through the family member or friends of or neighbors or other relatives. Or you could hire your own. But they have to be hired through my agency. I do all the oversight, all the check-ins, all the face-to-face interviews, surprise visits, etc. And during COVID, it was a game changer because people were afraid of a family member, and there wasn't a multitude of caregivers going in and out of the house. And you got to be there with your family. It was a great situation.
Well, Tricia, I have to thank you. I'm going to send people to the Area Agency on Aging, and thank you so much for the beautiful work you do and all that you outlined. So helpful for our listeners. Thank you.
Well, thank you.
Your Radio Doctor with Dr. Marianne Ritchie is presented exclusively by Independence Blue Cross.
Welcome back to our final segment of Your Radio Doctor. Up to this point, we've talked about home care for elderly members of the U.S. population. But what about young people with intellectual or physical disabilities? What programs are available for them? Well, in 1996, Audrey Coccia and Maureen Devaney created Vision for Equality to change the lack of understanding and to offer support for people with disabilities and their families in the community. Things we take for granted, a sense of belonging, acceptance for who we are, the ability to express our spirituality, resources to control our own destiny, these are not the norm for people with disabilities. Audrey, as we like to call her D Coccia, the co-founder and co-executive director, is here to tell us about the wonderful work of this great organization. Welcome, Dee.
Oh, thank you very much for having me here today.
Well, Dee, we had a beautiful conversation the other day, but I also checked your website, and I'll repeat it for our listeners several times, visionforequality.org. And the programs are brilliant and countless. You've been since 1996. That's almost 29 years, yes?
Yep.
Tell us how you got this started, Dee, and what the programs include.
Well, I have a daughter myself with severe intellectual disabilities. Her name is Gina, and she's lived at home with her father and I all her life. And as after she left school, and my daughter served as a plaintiff to get kids into school, because at one point, kids with disabilities didn't go to school either, especially if they had intellectual disabilities. So she was about 12 when she finally got into school. And that was because of a lawsuit that many of us started as families. I mean, families have been critical in this movement for people with disabilities and autism. And they have played a major role in seeing a change in the way we address their issues and help their families. So that's how I got started. And once she came out of school at 21, she had no services. You fall into this black hole, nothing left. School's done, everything's done. And so myself and Maureen Devaney, also a mom with a daughter, Colleen, who recently passed away, we decided we were going to help our families. Knowing what it was like, I was eventually able to get Gina into some kind of a program, but realized that actually, I have to be very honest with you, the first day she went into that day program all those years ago, I thanked my God and I promised I'd never forget all the other families who wanted and needed so much to have programs. So Maureen and I decided to start an organization. The city of Philadelphia helped us, and together we started an organization called Vision for Equality. And as you said, we're 29 years and counting. And most of the people that work for us are families and or self-advocates themselves. So, it's a grassroots group, but everybody knows who we are. We shake cages. We try to change the world for people. Even now, even after 29 years, even though we have all these programs, we work systemically at the state level and at the national level to continue to push forward the rights of people with disabilities.
And I'm listening, if you've been at this for 29 years, and at that point, your daughter was already 21?
Yes.
So how old is your dear Gina now?
Well, now she was already out of school, but she's just turning 60, so I'm not going to tell you how old I am.
No.
But she's just turning 60. She still lives with me. Her dad passed away, so it's just her and I. But that's kind of the rule, what you see out in community today.
I'm sure.
Yeah, about 83% of the people with disabilities no longer live in state centers or even many of them in group homes. They live at home with their families. Their families prefer it that way. The person prefers it that way. So Gina remains at home with me. She gets out and does stuff during the day, thank God, and gives me a chance to continue my work every day. But we have tried to see that most families can get that in community so that they can continue to go on.
But what's especially heartbreaking to hear is that at age 21, after whatever programs are available for some young person with intellectual or physical disabilities, you're on your own. And you've trained and given them support and education up to 21. And then A, they can't use it. And B, they're locked up at home they're isolated, as are you.
Yes.
And
yes.
Tell us some of the programs. Well, before I forget, I watched some of the videos on your website, and various parents said, here's my son or daughter now at 21. And one of the big things that you were able to do was to secure waivers.
Correct.
So these young people would have a chance to participate in the community, in a job or teaching. Tell us about that in particular.
Yes.
I think that is essential.
Yes. Well, over the years of working with the state, we've been able to get several types of waivers for families. Some families don't need a whole lot, but they need something. And so we've been able to establish 3 different waivers, some for people who don't need much, some people who need a little more, and then what they call consolidated waivers, where people need a whole lot. Many of those folks go into group homes because their families can no longer care for them. But these waivers have been financially supported by the federal government. About 53% comes from the federal government, 47% comes from the state to continue these programs. Unfortunately, it's not easy to get that money every year and to see that it gets increased so we can get more people. We have about 13,000 people on a waiting list and about 4,000 in a critical need. So even though we've been able every year to get more and more waivers, depending on the governor, depending on the legislature, we've been able to get more and more. But we still work every year up on the Hill trying to get more and more waivers for people so we can get more and more people off the list.
Well, I'm really begging listeners and directing them to visionforequality.org, your website, because you educate families about their rights. Families share their stories. Their voices, because of you, are heard by policymakers. They can celebrate their individuality. I'm just reading your incredible list. You're connecting families. You're offering training on how to navigate the intellectual disability and autism systems that are not straightforward. I mean, imagine a family who has, and you have lived this, your whole life is incredible, Dee. You're doing all this service for others because you were so grateful that you finally got some help for Gina. But you also were married to a firefighter. Every day he walked out the door, you weren't sure you were going to get your beautiful husband back. I mean, other people run away from fire. He is one of those rare people who walk into the fire for somebody else's benefit. It's amazing. And then your dear husband developed Alzheimer's, and you helped him for 2.5 years. How full can one person's basket be? It's an incredible story, Dee.
But what's good about it is that in spite of all that stuff as a family we were going through, that waiver helped me to support her and us as a family as I had to take care of him as well. He had cancer for 20 years as well. So, I mean, all of those things impacted on our home. But because we had a waiver, we were able to see she was well supported while I was able to take care of him as well. And that's what families need and want. You know, we really actually at this point, after over 30 years, we now deal with families from birth to, if you want to say, at the end of their life, along with their families, because we're now doing trauma care too for families, especially for young families who are just finding out that their son or daughter is born and that have to deal with a disability. So, you know, we're trying very hard to support families, you know, supplementing those needs as the system can support them day by day.
Well, and I see that when I really want people to visit the website, visionforequality.org, because you also help victims of sexual abuse. You're reaching out to anybody who's really hurting and doesn't know where to turn. You're offering solutions to the in-home nursing shortage crisis. We talked about that earlier. You help handle wills, trusts. You not handle them, but direct people where they can get help, I guess.
Right.
And I love that you have such a focus in addition to the caregiver's wellness, because, you know, they say on a plane before the flight starts, the safety tips, put your own mask on before you try to help your child or other people. If the caregiver collapses or just runs out of steam, that's not good either.
Right. And we have seen that, as I mentioned to you, Doctor, early on, that there are a lot of research that shows when you caregive for years without support and help, it really takes, you know, it takes a toll on your own health as well. So, and who's more important? The lock, you know, the thing that locks everything is that caregiver that keeps that family together. So it's really important for families to take care of themselves. We actually have yoga for people. We started some of this stuff during the pandemic because we knew so many people were sitting home 24/7. So we do yoga and we do other exercise programs and all online. So families don't have to come out. They can sit, you know, at a computer and they can, and at the same time, it helps people to support each other as they sit together and laugh together and do silly things together. But also, you know, that joy that you need in your heart, even though you do this work every day, is so important to keep people going and being healthy at the same time.
Well, Dee Coccia, it's your joy that exudes when you talk and your gratitude that motivated you to do this beautiful work that helps so many people. You really are the keystone of your own family and the keystone of Pennsylvania for all these people. But I would think, too, that your work has to be imitated now by people across the country. So we thank you for joining us today. Visionforequality.org. Visit the website. Do you like people to donate? Time, talent, treasure?
Oh, of course.
Send your dollars to Dee, because Dee, God bless you. You are really a true inspiration. And we thank you for joining us today.
Thank you, Doctor, so much for sharing our story. Thank you.
Thanks for listening to your Radio Doctor every Saturday afternoon at 5 here on Talk Radio 1210 WPHT. Listen to all of our shows at your convenience on Audacy.com, AUDACY. Thanks to our exclusive sponsor, Independence Blue Cross, for their continued support. And now you can watch every show on YouTube. Just search Your Radio Doctor. And please subscribe to our YouTube channel. It's free. YouTube. Search Your Radio Doctor and please click on subscribe. It's free. Our listenership continues to grow. We invite you to partner in the show as a sponsor. We'll help share your message and advertise. Contact me through email. Send a message to info@yourradiodoctor.net. info@yourradiodoctor.net. Please pray for the many families and people who in LA have lost their loved ones, been injured, or lost their homes. The people in North Carolina and Florida still suffering since the hurricanes, and for all the people without homes who are desperate for our help, including those in our city of brotherly love. We continue to pray for peace in our world, peace in our beloved country, in our families, and in each of our own hearts. This is your radio doctor, Dr. Marianne Ritchie, wishing you a happy, health, and safe week with the ones you love, and always here to remind you that your health is your wealth.
Thanks for listening to Your Radio Doctor, Dr. Marianne Ritchie, presented exclusively by Independence Blue Cross. To contact Dr. Marianne and to listen to today's show as well as past shows, visit yourradiodoctor.com. This program is paid for by Your Radio Doctor, LLC. All opinions or statements expressed on this program are solely those of Your Radio Doctor and their guests and do not reflect the opinions of WPHT or Odyssey. Today's program has been pre-recorded.